Hello, chefs. This is Chef's PSA Podcast. I'm your host, André Natera. My guest is Chef Takeshi Nishikawa. He was the former culinary director for Rose's Restaurant Group, and he recently left that to start Snow Crane, his Japanese-inspired ice cream shop. He has Michelin-starred experience, and he's trying to bring that Michelin experience to the world of ice cream. I think you'll really enjoy this episode. Stay tuned.
Today's episode of the Chef's PSA podcast is brought to you by the Chef's PSA store, the ultimate shop for chefs who live the hustle. Rock the Buck Frunch hats and hoodies, stay sucker-free with the Sucker-Free Kitchens line, or keep it real with the Just Cook collection. From tees to hoodies and more, we've got gear designed for chefs who work hard and play harder. Support the podcast and show off your style. Head to shop.chefspsa.com now and grab your favorites. Chef's PSA store. Cook hard, stay sharp.
Chef, good to see you. I like what you're wearing, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I've had a guest in the studio that looks this sharp.
Thank you for that.
You got. What do you got here? What is this?
The pocket square?
Yeah, but it's the pocket square is beautiful.
Yeah. It's one of the vintage one.
It's a vintage one?
It is.
Yeah, it looks good. So you're big time into fashion?
Big time.
Big time, yep. I wanted to talk to you really about, you're doing something pretty interesting right now. So for people that don't know, you were the culinary director, overseeing a couple of Michelin-star restaurants, and then now you're transitioning into a new business venture.
Yep.
So first I want to start out with what that business venture is. Like, what is it that you're moving into, and why did you want to start going into this new business venture?
Yeah. So the business venture that I'm starting is called Snow Crane. So it is a Japanese ice cream.
Yep.
So I used to manage the Rose's Restaurant Group as a culinary director, and we had a full restaurant with four to three Michelin stars, depending on when we were talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what made you want to start doing ice cream? So, because the reason I ask is that seems like a pretty big departure, at least from an outsider looking in, from doing Michelin star fine dining.
Mm-hmm. I think it's actually quite the opposite. I think it's pretty common. I think if you see a lot of other people speaking of for example, like Ari Dufresne, who's done, a lot of fine dining, moving into pizza places, a lot of people doing into donut places. So in that sense, I think it's pretty, similar to one of those chefs. I just wanted to do the ice cream because it was one of those where that's something I really love, even though I don't do a lot of dairies. But also, my wife and I moved into our neighborhood, and when we take a walk around, we just see what's in the area, and there's amazing barbecue places, amazing coffee places, and I was like, so what else is missing from this neighborhood? And when I thought about it, it was like, okay, dessert shop. And I didn't want to do a cookie, and it's pretty boring for me. I just wanted to do something that's fun, into something exciting, and something that I can, express myself through. And ice cream was the one that I chosen.
And what makes the style of ice cream that you're doing unique and different from? I mean, I think of like gelato or just regular. Is it the exact same thing, or is there something that makes yours uniquely different from what the expectation is?
Yeah, I think it's quite. I mean, there are, of course, similarities. I think, basic ingredients can be similar, but it doesn't always have to be. Some of the non-dairy milks that we use, like, for example, we use soy milk, almond milk, oat milk, things like that nature. But also, I think we highly, highly select very specialized ingredients from Japan. Myself also being from there, like, for example, we recently, during the pop-up, did black sesame, but we used one from Yokkaichi, which is hour north of where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And the nuttiness, the flavor, the color is amazing, completely different. And so we're really, really trying to curate what we use as ingredients. Just like sushi, anything else the same. I mean, we hyper-focus on ingredients and try and use the best we can.
So when you decided, I guess maybe a better question for me to ask is, when did you know it was time to start doing this and start to pursue this other venture?
Yeah. So I really, really enjoyed my role as a culinary director, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it for a very long time. And it's very challenging and demanding work. But more and more when I was going to work and things, I just wanted to do something of my own. Uh-huh. And I think it's one day, it's like, what did they say? There's no perfect day to start anything.
Yeah.
So that's why
plant a tree.
Exactly.
10 years ago or today.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's like more and more I had a feeling of, let me do something my own. And one day I was like, okay, they just do it because like there's no perfect day. So that's when I started.
So what does the process look like once you determine that? Did you start working on it before you left, or did you leave immediately and then start working on this?
I was still working on the project while I was employed. So I mean, the basic business plan was something that I wrote very long time ago. It was something that I was interested in. So like I had on the corner of a scrapbook that I had business plan written, just like I have other, half dozen other business plans written out. So it's like I didn't start from ground zero. Maybe it was like 10% there. Yep. And when I was working with the previous employer, I was basically working there the full time, and I'll come home and usually spend like midnight to 3 a.m. on this business. So like that's like incorporations, the menus, the logistics, like all the things that it takes to open the new business.
Mm-hmm. So when you're starting to write the business plan, what are some of the things that you're looking at? So do you have like a critical path that you're starting off of? So get the LLC, get the name, trademark it. What did your process look like?
Yeah, I think my process is like, so who are we and what is it? Yeah. So I think I'm a product driven person, and I think product first. Okay. So like, because again, like there's a lot of ice cream shops in our neighborhood, or I guess not in the neighborhood, but I guess in our states and in region, Washington, D.C., there's like 100 of them if you count them. So it's like, let's not open something that already exists. And what's going to make our business so different? What is going to make our product that much better? So like, that's where it started. And so that's why I think Japanese ice cream was like really the first thing. And I was like, okay, what did that mean? And start expanding that and really create the brand. And after that, like, ask the question, like, is that worth pursuing or not? And the answer was yes. Then at that point, I'll start going to like, okay, let's just start incorporating it. And what is the format's going to be? Is it going to be LLC, S Corp, C Corp, whatever the format of that is? And then start talking to other people and making sure like there's this bank account, there's all that, and what is the marketing? And then at that point, like you said, like, I will basically create the critical path, the roadmap, whatever you ever call it, and start executing one thing at a time. And yeah, I am.
For people that don't know, what is the biggest difference between the style of ice cream that you're doing and then kind of what they're already familiar with, like Italian gelato shops or Baskin Robbins or whatever the case may be?
Right.
What makes this unique?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference I would say is obviously the flavor, but also it is the aesthetic and what does it mean to be a Japanese ice cream. I think it is purest in the form we really look into the ingredients, and then there's not just whatever. And presentation, I think it is something that's a big thing. I think no matter what ice cream companies look at, like I think globally, like you're looking at Italian gelato in Rome, or like American style, higher fat content ice creams in New York, like they look pretty similar. Whether it is like scooped or whatever, like it's basically comes in a similar format. So I think I'm really trying to use what I learned through my career in fine dining and Michelin background, and to really translate those into this product. So that means there's garnishes and there are some things that looks a little different than what you would expect. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why when we're even doing pop-up and things like that, it's like, a lot of comments that we've gotten is like, it's literally the most beautiful ice cream I've ever seen.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, like for example, I think we just
and also when people are listening or watching, I put up an image of kind of what you're talking about.
Sure,
an image.
Sure.
Yeah,
we've done several kinds, but I think one of the one that was one of our more popular one was we recently, that like I said earlier, is the black sesame ice cream.
Yep.
So it's really dark ice cream, and over the top we dusted it with really fine ground the black sesame, so it looks like a matte black on the top instead of like shiny black.
Yeah.
And over the top, we just put it on. We put out these gold chrysanthemum form shaped tuile, and that's like dusted off as gold. So the contrast between the black and gold is really stunning. And also the chrysanthemum seal has like that very Japanese aesthetic. And it's like the amount of time it takes to prep some of those items, like, it's now almost like some of the company just can't replicate because it's, that's what we do and that's what we're used to. If you find any restaurant, sometimes it takes more time to prep the garnish than the protein itself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So this is like Michelin level ice cream.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay.
And in fact, I think that's what we're going for. I mean, to be honest, I think they're the, world in which that we can start doing tasting menu once the brick and mortar shop open. And yeah. I think, if we become the first ice cream shop in the U.S. to get a Michelin, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Really? Okay. Now, and you've clearly piqued my interest now. I'm very interested because I'm not familiar with it and I'm trying to envision it. I mean, it sounds amazing. Um, from a cost standpoint, though, what would you retail, or what is retail right now for? What is it? A scoop, a container? How is it sold?
Yeah, I mean, we doing pop-up, we do scoop, single scoop,
Yeah.
one or two different kinds, and also we sell pints.
Okay. Then what does retail look like, and then what is your cost on the back end typically?
Yeah, so one scoop we tend to charge somewhere between $9 to $13. $9 on simple scoop plus garnish, and 13 is more talking about like a sundae type of format. Like recently we've done like white Japanese strawberry over the ice creams, and like that was more on the higher end cost. And then pints we normally sell for 15 a pint.
Starting to understand this a little bit more, like because I don't think I don't have a frame of reference on it, right? So I've never been to a Japanese ice cream shop, and I can't think of an ice cream shop that might be performing at that level that I could really fully grasp what you're trying to do. But it really sounds like you're doing something incredible. What would the brigade and the kitchen structure look like for something? I mean, do you have a pastry chef there with you? Is it just you? I mean, I'm sure there's people up front. Is it going to be counter service, or is this sit down?
Yeah, so we have different formats, but what I'm envisioning today is it's going to look pretty much like a regular ice cream, but I do like the aesthetic to be pretty seamless and minimal. Like, I don't want a lot of merchandise on the counter. I don't want a lot of flashy things and all these like advertisement and that kind of thing. I want it to be like super sleek, like very natural look, whether it's wood or concrete, like the materials, like we have to talk about it, but I think we want it to be like really soothing kind of environment. And I think there should be a counter seat. And there are a couple of seats, but I think outside of that, it's pretty much just you can pick up and go, or you can grab a seat and dine. But it's not like there's not going to be a servers, like just going to be like cashier type of person. And also there's like person who's scooping the ice cream, and of course managers, someone like that would be doing a lot of production and things like that.
What does the creative process look like for you when you're coming up with the ice creams, and about how many different styles of ice cream are you going to have on the menu? What are you thinking when you get open?
Yeah, so because like I think as I mentioned, I do want to do pretty minimalistic concept. So I'm going to take the flip side of what Baskin Robbins and these guys are doing with 30, 40 different flavors. I'm going to only do like maybe 4, maybe 6.
Okay.
And people are going to think it's like, wow, that's not very much options. But I think what that allows us to do is like really be hyper seasonal. There are certain ingredients that only last a very short time. Mm-hmm. Like those things, we get to highlight it. And once that goes off, we get to swap it very quickly because we don't have a lot of inventories. And then operationally also, like we don't have that much inventory because we only have a very few SKUs of ice creams instead of like so many. So that cuts down the labor, that cuts down the inventory costs. I think from business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. In terms of say flavor wise, like I say, it is hyper seasonal. So if there are certain ingredients that comes in season, like that's what we're gonna use. So we have a calendar with when these product that comes in season, and we prioritize those first. And then if you want to do certain like matcha, hojisha, or any tea based flavors or anything else, those things are like one that we can plug in the holes. Like we don't have certain kind of time frame where, like for example, in the winter time, we don't have fresh fruit. So that time it does make sense to do more tea-based flavor or sweet potatoes or things like that.
From a process standpoint, is the process of making Japanese style ice cream any different from what we're familiar with? Most chefs, I should say, are most familiar with the custard base and then Carpiani machine or something like that. Is it pretty much the same process?
Yeah, we're going to use Carpiani in very similar type machines. I think it can be similar, but it can be very different. So for example, there are some items that we were thinking of is tofu ice cream or more soy-based ice cream, like you using toasted soy flour, like kinako, like things like that. Then we're going to explore more to do how can we make some of the frozen desserts with soy milk as a base. Not because we want to make it into vegan or vegetarian or these kind of things, but it's really trying to highlight the product. And I think, if you use that, if you're using a lot of soy milk and soy-based product, then it's it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to put, a lot of dairy, heavy creams and things like that, because it's just going to mask a lot of flavors. So,
That's fascinating. Like you're going to send me down a whole rabbit hole of understanding ice cream differently. I'm like, I don't have an ice cream machine at home, but I might buy one just to start. I mean, you said some really interesting ideas flavor-wise.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to your previous job. Your previous job, you were culinary director for, you said 3 to 4 Michelin-star restaurants, depending on when. For people that don't know, what would that role look like? How were you splitting up your time between multiple restaurants, and then what would your involvement be in the day-to-day?
Yeah, so I joined them, I think it was the tail end of the COVID. So that's a unique period. It's not like, any other period where things are more stagnant and, like pretty expected growth of the business. So like my role changed, like I wouldn't say month over month, but maybe every quarterly, maybe. So I think the first thing I did when I joined was to reopen one of the 2-star Michelin restaurants that was shut down after COVID. So that means, starting from scratch. So again, there's no construction permit that I have to go through, but again, it's about the hiring, training, the menu, the costing, the whole 9 yards.
Did you have the same chef de cuisine?
Different,
yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things I took on, and after that was we had a catering program and private dining program, or I guess private dinners. That was one of those where during COVID time we were doing a lot of packaged food and things like that, just like a lot of restaurants has done. And we were doing a lot of smaller size in-home dinners, like 10 people, 12 people, 15, maybe 20 people at people's houses. And we'll just take, plates, music, the servers, cooks, everything, and we really try to recreate the Michelin type of experience in people's residence.
How difficult was that?
It can be difficult because sometimes you like to host 20 people at like a very small townhouse. And it's like there's no way server's going to be able to go behind you.
What was the best way to be efficient if someone is calling you up and saying, "Hey, come in," and you arrive, and then you realize, oh, that's the kitchen setup? Did you have mitigation plans behind the scenes to make sure, like, hey, we don't know what we're getting into, so we need to make sure we can execute this food very smoothly?
Right. I mean, menus and prep, and just like any fine dining restaurant, I mean, a lot of preps are done ahead of time. It's a lot that has to do with like, reheating and, cooking the protein and that type of stuff is the only thing that it takes place during service, right? I mean, if you're at a Michelin restaurant, you're not going to make puree a la menu. It's like already made. So it's that type of thing. But I mean, there are definitely some interesting ones that we went through, and, salespeople do their due diligence, of course, and figure out, what the kitchen will look like and all this, that. And I've definitely personally been to times where I show up at the site and there's no kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it happened.
So you're just cooking on like a click burner or something like that? So reheating everything sous vide?
I mean, sometimes yes, but also like there are times where like, I mean, I've been in the industry, especially in the Washington, D.C. area for a pretty long time. I'm not going to say how long because that's going to give away how old I am. But so I know a lot of people in almost every block of the street or in the neighborhood. So that being said, like, if really things happen, then it's like I can just call them up and say, oh, hey, chef, like, I'm on this place, this is what's going on, can I come over to borrow a couple of things?
Yeah.
And they'd be sure.
Washington, D.C. is such an interesting food scene too. I was really happy when the Michelin Guide went there, and you guys got your stars, and In a Little Washington has 3 now, right? They got their 3. Yeah. But I mean, there's so much history there, and you drive around, it's so beautiful. And I was there in Washington, D.C., I want to say like in 2008. I went for something. And I remember I ate at Eric Repair used to have a restaurant there, one of the Ritz-Carltons. I can't remember what it was called.
It's the one on the West
Bistro something.
Yeah.
It was really good. I remember and that was my first time being exposed to the Washington food scene, the D.C. food scene. I was blown away at how diverse it was, how good it was. I mean, I think Roberto Dano was probably the king at that time.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting to see how far it's come, and it was really nice to see Michelin there. It was really nice to see your former team received the accolades that it got. And whenever people would go there, I would always send them to your restaurants. I would say, go eat there, go check it out, see what they're doing. What would your day-to-day look like once, let's say post-COVID, and things are back open, and you're overseeing multiple restaurants? Because how long ago was it that you left?
End of last year. So
end of last year.
So a month ago.
So things are already back to normal. Restaurants are busy. How would you split your time up between multiple restaurants?
So toward the end, I was primarily responsible for the expansion of the catering and private event.
Uh-huh.
So I actually spend almost 100% of the time actually overseeing that end. And restaurant side, there's also like corporate level chefs who are able to provide support and things like that to their end. So I was basically primarily like I described earlier when he was doing 10, 20 people dinners. Like by the time I exited, we were doing 200 people, 100 people, and one of the largest one we've done was 800 people at the offsite venue at Michelin caliber. And so it really takes a lot of logistics and planning and training, expansion, production. I mean, you name it.
What does the hierarchy of chefs in your position look like within the brand? So meaning you're overseeing catering, and then I'm assuming there's individual chef de cuisines of the restaurants, and then is there like other people? I guess what I'm trying to ask is how many people have their fingers in every individual concept, and at what point does it funnel up to there's one decision maker?
Yeah, so I mean, our company did have a pretty large management group that managed to so that means directors, senior managers, and senior culinary managers, and those people basically were overseeing all shops at all time basically. And then each shop, of course, had the head chef, chef de cuisine, sous chef, junior sous chef, CDPs, and so on. And ultimately, the decision goes over to the senior leadership, the directors and senior management, and also to the ownership.
When you're trying to develop like kitchen culture for these places, like what were some of the things that you would look for in potential new cooks? Like, hey, I want to bring you on the team, but here's some things that I'm looking for that's going to make you a good fit. And here's some non-negotiable things that if you're working in my kitchen, these are some skills or some behaviors that you need to have before you step foot in the kitchen.
Yep, I think it may be similar with everybody else's kitchen, but I think it's the mutual respect, either toward other people or product. I think that's a big thing. I mean, there are a lot of things we can teach, right? I mean, how to make puree, how to sear meat, this, that. But I think at that level, it's really difficult to change people's personality or how they treat other people, things like that. Whether, like some people are passive aggressive, some people or just have a lot of, baggages or whatever. And so I try to look for people who are passionate and people who are respectful and people who are honest. And, I think those are the qualities I always look for.
Did you notice, especially when people were starting to recover from the pandemic, was it more difficult to recruit staff? And the reason I ask because, having restaurants with Michelin stars, I would imagine that you're attracting more people that want to work for you. But at the same time, everyone was struggling right after COVID trying to get staff. Was that something that you all struggled with at that time? Or was it, no, everyone just wanted to come back and, you had your choice of the best cooks in the city?
Like, for example, like I think our flagship or other restaurant side where there were accolades, I think it was a little bit easier. But as I was managing the catering and private event side, I think that was a little harder. Just because when people hear catering, people tend to have certain things in their mind, thinking like, like slamming the hot box and, just like whether it's overcooked or not, send it out. And that's like what people think of catering as. Right. And we're doing like 3, 4, maybe 10 times the quality. Yeah. But again, general consensus of what catering was that. So it was really hard actually for us to really hire people and get them interested.
So how do you get them interested in catering? So when they're already in, I'm sure they saw the level of execution that you're doing. Right. But to get them in, how did you sell them on like, hey, this is why you want to work in catering with me?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways. I think catering, one, it takes a lot of logistics and planning. Yeah. So if there are chefs who really want to open their own business, I mean, it's no different, right? I mean, if it's a restaurant, yes, the prep has to get done, go through tasting, and then start firing during service. But catering is if the prep is not done, you're way behind. I mean, now it's you still have to pack the food. You have to, load the van. You need to go to the site, set up the kitchen because there's no kitchen oftentimes. So there's a lot more steps.
Count everything.
Right. That's right. And it's there's how many times, we're missing something and have to go get somewhere. Because, you're not cooking in your own kitchen. So, I mean, it forces you to be more organized. Yeah. And forces you to be more disciplined. So I think it really, I think those are some of the skills that really translate. I keep telling everybody, it's if you could do the catering thing, it's the restaurant thing is a lot easier in comparison. But there's so much you can learn. And last but not least is catering is there's unlimited guest count we can do. Because the restaurant, if you have 120 seats, if you're turning twice out of 240. But catering, I mean, if you go to large venues, you can do 1,000 people, 2,000 people. I don't know what the largest catering operation has ever done, but it's far more than any fine dining or any even casual restaurant can possibly do, because it's like there's not that many seats.
Right. And it's not a la carte, so meaning that everyone's getting the same thing. So you don't have to figure out, like, we're going to play the guessing game of who's going to get what. No, everyone gets the same thing. It's catering. They paid for the beef dinner or whatever.
Right.
So food cost is a little easier to manage. Prep is a lot easier to manage in a sense. Like, it's not easy. It's a little bit more thoughtful.
Right.
I think I agree with you. I think people that have worked in catering and then transition to a la carte, like, I think they understand how to scale and organize a little bit better, and they plan just a little bit better. I think it's good for chefs to work in both worlds. There's definitely something to learn from both.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Did you have catering experience before you went into that? I mean, I'm sure when you're in the business, everyone has a little bit of catering experience, but like in leadership as a caterer, as a chef caterer.
No.
So a lot of it you were learning as you went.
Yeah. But I think it's just like, if you're a line cook, I mean, if you have 5 dishes and each component has 5 different mise en place, like, you got to get those things ready, right?
Yeah.
You scale up. It's nothing different. The numbers are larger. You're doing, like 200 portion of, beef or fish or, whatever. And it's a, 40 course of, soup instead of, like two quarts of puree. I mean, volumes are higher, but the principles are the same.
Yeah. Did you have like a methodology of importance or hierarchy of importance? Like, we always do meats first. We always do, if we get in a time crunch, don't worry so much about the pluches and the garnishes. Like, we need to make sure we have protein before we have pluches.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like the things that takes a long time, whether it's like, like sous vide beef that take 2 days, like things like that, we have to get done for sure. But I also start looking at not just day to day, but week over week, or 2 weeks time frame, and especially during the busy time, because we batch it so that we're not doing like each party at each event at a time, but we just like organize it, and what are the menu spreads going to look like, and really like prep the whole thing and then redistribute.
If someone was coming to you right now and saying, hey, I'm going to be a catering chef, like, what's the one piece of advice that you'd say, hey, before you take that job, make sure you know how to do this?
I'll say probably like stay flexible and be adaptable. I think the hardest thing, because every venue is different. And I think you do get used to different venues where, if that place and, you have X, Y, and Z, or, if it's that building, it's going to take X amount of time to load up and load out. So you do get a sense of that. But, if you're talking like residential homes and stuff, it comes in so many different variations, and you really have to be like adaptable. And when, things go unexpectedly, like, you can at least stay calm and then find a solution instead of freaking out, because as the head of the department, if you start freaking out, then everybody else is like, it just like the whole operation become a chaos. Right. So I think it's like staying calm under pressure and in solution oriented mindset. I think those are like non-negotiable.
Is that something that you always had as a chef, or is that something that you had to learn, staying calm under pressure?
So I think now I can say, fortunately, but when I was going through the chef or the cook periods, I thought it was challenging. But there are definitely a lot of times where the situation was tougher for me. Like when I first chef job, there were definitely 7 months that I didn't have a lot of staff, and I really worked the entire restaurant on my own with maybe 1 or 2 dishwashers who'd been there for 20 years, I'd say. But door has to open, prep has to get done. And it's like at that point, like just myself freaking out, it's not going to do anything.
Right.
So, and I think I had that type of experiences where there's no option, whether you can or cannot do it, just you have to do it. So it's not about can we do it? It's more about how we do it.
Yeah, it's so funny. You've been in this situation many times. I've been in this situation many times as a chef. Is like you look at the amount of work that you have, or you look at the rail of tickets that you have, and you're dealing with the staff or the amount of resource that you have, and you think there's no way we're going to get through this. It's impossible. And you always get through it. Like, it always seems to get done. Everyone always seems to get fed. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule of chaotic services and people walk out. But for the most part, it always seems to get done. One of the things I used to do when I was a chef is I'd write the prep list, always more difficult than the level of the cook could probably finish, because I knew like you're going to get it done, whether it's 8 hours or 10 hours or 15 hours, you're going to get it done. So if I give you more, you're still going to get it done, because people figure out a way. They learn how to work efficiently, or they put a little extra in their step. Anyway, that's a tangent. I know something that we've talked about before is chefs making sure that they're making good financial decisions, especially starting that early in their career. And it's something that in my career as a chef, I was always fascinated by understanding how the financial world works. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of good decisions. But I think at a certain point, and especially the earlier in your career as a chef or a cook, you need to start thinking about your financial future. And I know we've talked about this offline, but what are some of the things that you think people should be looking at, and what are some of the best practices that you had as a chef to make sure that you're setting yourself up financially?
Yeah, I think it's just like any jobs, or I guess personal finance 101 is like, you spend less than you make. That's
Start
definitely
with the basics.
I think that's definitely the first, because a lot of people does tend to spend more than what they can.
Yeah.
Or, what I can afford or what you can afford is it means different to the different people. But I think it's like really like, checks and balances, like what comes in. And I guess some people say like, that three shoebox method, like the money comes in, money goes out, whatever left is yours to keep. Right. So I think it's like, how can you expand that last shoebox? I think is the idea.
Mm-hmm. If you were giving people like some practical tips when they're making their purchasing decisions, or if they were looking at, benefits and things like that when they go into new jobs, what are some things that you were looking for, like financial incentives when you were taking a job? Like what were some of the non-negotiables that you would look for?
Yeah, it's funny. I was pretty focused and I am focused in a lot of finance and economic side of the cooking and all this. But I think when I was younger, I actually didn't pay that much attention. And I think the biggest thing for me was actually the opposite, where things that I couldn't define with a dollar were the only thing that I really cared. The experience, what I could learn from this place, and how can I get better. I think that was the only thing I focused. And I, quite frankly, like nowadays I see more and more people who's worried about, or the decision is based on how much I can make per year. Mm-hmm. But I think when I was coming up, I think it was more about, the craftsmanship, the learning of the trade. And I think that was actually what I focused on the most.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think I've taken jobs I've taken a pay cut to go, because like that's a better job. So even if I'm making less money, I'm still going to take it.
Right.
But at a certain point, the outside world kicks in. It's like you have bills, you have responsibilities,
right.
And you got to make good decisions. What are some of the practices that you put in place, especially being a chef? Because a lot of times when you're coming up, you're not making that much money until you start to reach a certain level of chef. We start to make a little bit more money. But were there any strategies that you put in place to set yourself up financially for the future?
Yeah, I think anytime I started making just like extra money,
yeah,
I think one, it's like, again, save those things and do one of the following. One is either, open up the retirement account and really start investing.
Yeah.
I think that'll set you up in the long run. Another thing I also did as a chef, and that, a lot of other financial people wouldn't do, is really acquiring unique assets that has potential future value, like such as like certain whiskeys, certain books, certain knives, and these things that I knew that, the cost and what I was buying in. And then, what would the price of that be 10 years from now? And
can you give me some examples?
Yeah, I think there's like a certain blue seal knife from Japan that are like, like made by very famous producers that doesn't have a lot in circulation. And again, supply and demand. If the supply is very strained, and then like demand grows, and then if the price is going to get higher. And the same thing, there's a limited bottles or the whiskeys or wines, or the same thing as like certain limited edition cookbooks. I knew certain like these famous chefs who have like very limited print cookbooks. I was the first one to buy it because supplies are very limited. If the 2,000 copies get printed, and that's the end of it. And then some of the books that used to be $50 now, like $3,000-$4,000.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of those. I have like a Strahn's cookbook. It's like $1,000.
Me
I still
too.
have, yeah, I
Me
was like,
too.
oh, shit. Someone told me that. They're like, you know how much that book is worth? I was like, I don't know. I bought it for $50. They're like, no, you look on Amazon. I was like, holy shit. Or one of my other favorite books that I have at home is the Alain Ducasse, the big, thick thing, Grand Livre de Cuisine, which is like, I remember I bought it like 15 years ago for like $250. I don't know how much it is now, but but you're right. A lot of these cookbooks, I have so many. I should probably do more research on like what some of these are worth, but people don't know that they're sitting on a gold mine or they're going into half price books and like, oh, that's
Yeah, totally.
yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned knives. So I'm opinionated about knives. A lot of chefs are opinionated about knives. I personally think, like when you're first starting out to cook, don't spend a lot of money on knives until you know what you're doing, because I don't think if you're going to spend thousands of dollars on a really expensive Japanese knife, but you don't have the skills, you might break it, you might lose it, someone might steal it, you don't know how to care for it. Right. I would say don't invest in really expensive knives until you have a firm grasp on understanding how to use knives. I don't know if you share that same philosophy, but what is your philosophy when it comes to that, when it comes to knife purchases? And then my second thing is you mentioned investing in good quality knives. What are some things that you would look out for to make sure that it is a good quality knives? And where do you go to get good quality knives?
Yeah. Okay, let me fully answer this question. So I do agree with you. I've seen so many chefs who are, second, third year cooking and get it, and these razor sharp, like blue super or whatever, and next thing you know, like pinned avocado and crack the knife, and that's like I've seen that so many times, and it just like it's crazy. So it's like it's definitely like get your skills up first, and then really dabble into it. But I think there are two different ways I approach it. Also, is one is like something that you use and something that you just collect, and there are a lot of knives that I have that I don't use. But I think those are two different bucket and two different categories. So I think if you're just going to collect it just because you like it and not just going to look at it, and then I think you can buy whatever you want. But I think if you're going to use it, definitely you want to know where your skills at. But where do I buy it? That's a great question. I mean, I feel like there are a lot of online retailers and I get a lot of ads myself from people in California or Corey in New York or whoever. But I think there are a lot of amazing retailers in the US. But I think I tend to buy it when every other year that I used to go back to Japan is the only time I usually buy those things.
One of my friends just, I think I told you this. One of my friends, Gabe Morales, he got this beautiful knife from Japan when Noma was doing the pop-up there. The chef de cuisine at Noma, or the chef at Noma, got him one and sent it to him, and it's this. I mean, it's a beautiful knife. It looks like a Hattori Hanzo sword from like it's really nice. Do you paint? Is that
I do. I do charcoal and used to do oil a little bit, but yeah. Also photography is a big one too.
Yeah. Okay. So when you talk about like investing in good assets, I like investing in things like that also. I have a lot of art in my house. Actually, one of my friends, his name is Alex Gonzalez. He's been on this podcast. He is an artist, and I have several of his works in my office. I have something from Jacques Pepin too.
No, really?
Yeah. And then Alex has several of his paintings hanging up in Alinea. And I think he's going to go up in Dave Barron's new restaurant as well. But anyway, you also paint and you do photography, right?
Yep.
So what inspired you to paint, and how much does that cross over into the culinary arts with you?
Yeah, I think
maybe a better question is not what inspired you to paint, because maybe you don't even remember that. But
yeah.
But where do you get inspiration from now when you are painting?
Yeah. I think that's a really hard question. I think I just always loved working with hands, whether it's cooking or paintings or anything, like creating something, right? Whether it's physical, it used to be, and nowadays more digital and things like that. But I think it's really about the shapes, the color, the textures, the whole 9 yard. I think inspiration really comes from anywhere. Like, when I'm taking a walk outside with my wife and daughter and just walking, and that sometimes does it. Sometimes we go to we often visit art museums and things like that, and a lot of that is very inspiring and thought-provoking, and one of those things really get me going.
How much of what you are as an artist reflects in who you are as a chef, and how do they cross?
I think a lot. I think when I do cook, I mean, of course, cooking is first and foremost, like, it has to taste good,
Right.
but also it's beyond that. We talked about it during the ice cream thing. I think way it looks is also just as important, if not more, because before people eat anything, they're going to look at it first.
Sure.
Because most people don't, I've seen those, like, blindfolded restaurant, you just eat, food that you don't see what it looks like. But for the most part, people's going to see with their eyes first. And I think it's incredibly important what it looks like. And for that reason, I think I do spend quite an amount of time, like, how do I want to present this dish? And so, like, whether it's the color thing, it's like, like, that's why I've done all very monochromatic themes where it's like everything's black, everything's white, everything's green, because I think sometimes that's very visually stunning. But also, like, the colors, like, whether it's contrast, complementary. And I think I take all these things pretty seriously. And what plates it go on, and is it complementary or not? So it's like, I think I think it goes beyond. Sometimes it's like, is a fish 4 ounce or 5 ounce. I think it's take it one step further and really look at it and say, what is the best way for you to really, like, for me, they just say plate is the canvas, right? So picking the right canvas, and canvas comes in different formats, but really picking those things first. And then once that's figured out, then it's like, how do you present this thing so that it can look its best? So I think there's a lot of huge crossover between either the medium in photography or oil painting or pencil, charcoal, watercolor. I think you name it. I think there's a lot of similarities.
When you're designing new dishes or menus, and let's just say a specific dish that you want to create, what comes first? The visual, when in the creative process, I mean, do you come up with a visual idea and then work towards the flavors, or do you come up with something that you want to eat and then work towards the visual?
Yeah, I think the product comes first, and so seasonal ingredients is also what we talked about earlier. So that comes first. And then how does that inspire the rest? Like, for example, going back to the ice cream, the Japanese white ice cream. So if I keep putting so many different colors and that into it, like, of course I can make it into this, like, sundae that has 14 different colors, but sometimes it takes away from the focus. And then my thing is, like, at that point, it's like, okay, what is the focus here? And the focus is the white strawberry. So let's create all white dish. It really highlights the white element of the ingredients. So in that sense, I think it's ingredient what drives me. And then the second thing is, it's like, okay, how do I want the dish to look like? And then start the process that way. But I have had a case where it's like, okay, like in a summer day, it was right after I went to Okinawa. Okay, like some of the beautiful beaches are really stunning. So how do I encapsulate that into a dish? So, like, that way, I think it was like the process wise. I think the ingredient didn't come first. It was like the themes and all that things came first, and then engineer, like, what the dish will look like. So I think it can take a different entry point. Sometimes it comes from the ingredients, sometimes it comes from the certain season, the holidays or whatever. I think it all kind of varies.
Interesting. Do you appreciate that style of food more when you go out and eat? Are you actively seeking food and restaurants that are doing something artistic, or is that what you like to create but not necessarily what you like to eat?
Something probably both. And I do appreciate people put a lot of thoughts into the food. In the food, it's also back out. I think the restaurant itself, like, because it's like food is only one aspect of dining. And once you get to the door, what does the outside look like? What is the doorknob? Is it brass? Is it wood? Is it metal? Is it, and then as you go in, there's the music, there's like the whole floor, there's the table in the whole 9 yards. And after you're seated, what is the glassware made of? What the flatwares and linens, like, is it cotton or napkin? And I think all these things play a role. So I think I do tend to go into all that. So that's actually, like, way beyond the dish, but it's like, I think I like the whole cohesive idea behind what this restaurant is and what this artist is trying to create, because it is actually sometimes go way beyond the food itself. But I enjoy both. Some simple food that's on the plate and in, like, really nice grilled fish with, like, seasonal vegetables. I think that sounds really delicious. But again, if you're going to fine dining or certain themes in restaurants, it does make sense of little bit more thoughts than just, fish, potato, asparagus, done.
You bring up an interesting point. I think it's, I don't want to say it's getting lost, but I don't see as much attention to it anymore in a lot of restaurants, especially restaurants that are positioning themselves to be at the upper echelon. Is that I personally, I love fine dining. I love going into a restaurant, and I love everything that's luxury, meaning I want to touch the crystal stemware. I want the linen to be beautiful. If it's a placemat, I want it to be a certain type of leather, right? I want the restaurant to smell a certain way. I want there to be a certain posh when I'm eating there. I want the chairs to be comfortable. I want everything to be thoughtful. And I've noticed, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, if I'm going to judge a restaurant, and I don't judge restaurants usually, but like if I'm going to go in and judge a restaurant because they're asking me to, like, is this an excellent restaurant? I often say it's not just the food. It's about everything. Every single detail, everything has to be important. But I do feel a lot of restaurants now, I don't know if it's just trendy or if chefs just don't want to think about this. It's about the food on the plate, and that's all that matters. And I think that's great because food on the plate, it's delicious, and you're putting all your focus on that, and it makes delicious food. But at the same time, I think sometimes we're neglecting the dining aspect and creating that sense of not just hospitality, but luxurious hospitality. I think is something that, especially in the U.S., I think that's really missing in a lot of restaurants that are trying to position themselves as luxury restaurants, is they're missing a little bit of the luxury part.
Yeah.
You notice that?
Yeah, I think so. And also, like you said, it's like, I also don't go into a restaurant judging whether they're doing a good job or bad job. It's not for me to decide, but I think it's really about branding and the identity of the business and the chef and the restaurateur. It's like, so it's like, if I'm going to Neapolitan restaurant, I don't expect like Ginori platewares and Christoph and napkins to be made of, like Thomas Mason cotton. Like, it didn't need any of that at all. But I think it's like, within its own caliber, its own category, like, what is it they're trying to accomplish? And it is okay to do a burger shop and not have fancy linen. It doesn't need it. So it's like, you're really defining what is the business, what is the food, and what is the culture, and it really like solidifying the brand and identity, and really like, like double down on those things and see like how good you can get.
Yeah. I just feel like sometimes as chefs, we started frowning on nice things at a certain point.
Yeah.
It was not good to have nice things. Like, the food could be good, but everything else didn't have to be good. And I miss nice things.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to lie, I like nice things.
Yeah.
I like to, I like fancy things. As I tell people, I'm a simple man. I have simple tastes of, caviar, good cigars, and good whiskey. Right?
Yeah.
Can't
go wrong with that.
Like, I'm a simple person. Like, make sure that's good and everything else is good. I know you're like me. Like, you like you study languages. Right? How many languages do you speak?
3 is definitely fluent, so Japanese, English, Spanish, and I used to be much better Italian, but then Spanish took that over.
Yeah.
And I've been doing Russian for about 6 months, or more than that, actually.
I used to work with a bunch of Russians, so I have some basic Russian, like Hagdala, gotta show. I don't even know what these words mean, but we would do catering plate ups, and then they would always say skoika, which I think means how many. So I don't remember a lot of my Russian, but I used to work in Italian kitchens as well, where my chef was Italian.
Right.
I'd like to say I'm very fluent in English. I'm conversational Spanish, and I'm tourist Italian.
Yeah.
I could get by as a tourist, but
right. Where the bathroom is.
Yeah. But I like Italian. Right now I'm learning Italian. One of the things that I'm doing, and I'm curious what you do to learn, is obviously I use Duolingo like a lot of people. I'm on I think I have like a 1,500 day streak on Duolingo. Yeah, I'm OCD like that. But what I found more practical now, because Duolingo is great, but it doesn't really teach me, because I'll watch an Italian shows, like they don't talk like a Duolingo, or when I speak with someone that's from Italy, they don't talk like Duolingo. But I'll use ChatGPT now, voice activated, and I'll speak to it in Italian. And sometimes I'll ask it, like, change your dialect up to sound like you're from Naples. Mm-hmm. And it changes it up, and it'll correct me. So we'll just keep talking, and I'll say, okay, now correct me at the end. Like, talk to me in Italian and then correct me based on what I say. So I think that's an interesting new way for people that are into learning languages. But how do you go about learning them?
Yeah, I think English and first and foremost, that was my second language because my Japanese wasn't my first, and that one, like, I had no option because my dad decided to, because of her job, move to U.S. and of course in Japan, like, you'd start taking.
How old were you?
15 when I moved
15,
here,
okay.
and that's like maybe taking 2 years of Spanish in high school here. Like, that's nowhere near, you're ready.
Right.
So, but then I was pulled out the middle school, like, 3 years before graduation. Basically, I didn't graduate from middle school. So, like, I had no option but to graduate from high school. Otherwise, like, there's no way I'm going to go and get into college if I just only have an elementary school paper. So, I think that really, like, forced me to learn. And I was in the immersive environment where everybody else spoke English. So, like, I decided to hang out with local guys and local gals instead of hanging out with Japanese friends. So, I think that really got me going. So, I think I didn't have an option. So, that definitely, I learned a lot.
How do you approach learning languages now?
Now, I think because I've done that first, so now I've actually completed, second language. The process is a lot easier because then it's like, grammatically, like, especially like some of the languages we're talking here, like, Italian, Spanish, those things are very similar to English. So, I mean, for me, my process is like, what does the grammatical structure look like? And what are the cognitives, which is like the words that are very similar to the language you already know. And those things unlock like thousands, if not tens of thousands of vocab with a snap of a finger. And after that is like really just repetition and just like cutting onions or, tornading potatoes, like, like you can do it one time. So you're going to make a ton of mistakes and you're going to cut fingers a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And I got embarrassed so many times by doing wrong things.
Yeah.
And that's really how I got fluent in a lot of languages. So
what are you going to learn after Russian?
I don't know. I mean, I honestly, like, I haven't had a lot of time to learn that like I used to because, again, managing restaurants, starting your own business, I mean, that tend to take over. And also now I've daughter and like time allocation a little different than it used to be. But if I were able to do something else next, and maybe like Arabic, something like that,
yeah.
Or Korean, Chinese. Like something like that could be fun.
Yeah. Did it help you at all in the kitchen? I mean, I know, like, for me, Spanish is tremendous in the kitchen, knowing Spanish.
Yeah.
But for you, did you notice a significant advantage as a chef speaking multiple languages?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because I mean, I'm the same way. I think growing up, especially start cooking in U.S., a lot of chefs, cooks, sous chefs I had were from Central America or South America, things like that. And I quickly figured out it was a lot easier for me to learn Spanish than to teach all cooks, all chefs, English or Japanese or whatever. So at that point, I was like, you know what, let me just do this and did that. And once I started speaking Spanish, I mean, communication a lot easier when you speak in a language they understand.
Yeah.
So I think it cut down a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And it really, I can communicate quickly. So it really saved a lot of time. So it's like, and I had to second guess whether, did she understand this or not? Because I've been on the side where, the foreign guy coming over here and then I don't really understand anything and keep shaking head and he asks the questions, like, did you understand it? And I'd be like, no.
Just talk louder.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I think they helped a lot. And I think also got to really understand the culture. And when you speak their language and, eat family meal together and things like that.
Yeah.
And at that point that you become part of them. So it's like, you're just like not like treated as like, someone that's outsider, but you all of a sudden become insider, even though you don't look alike and stuff like that. So I thought that was very helpful.
If, normally when I wrap up the show, I always ask people like, if you had a Mount Rushmore of chefs, 4 chefs out there that you'd like to give recognition or really influenced you as a chef, who are they? Maybe you didn't work for them. Just
there's so many.
You had to pick 4.
Right. That's a really hard one because, again, there's so many great chefs out there, and for me to pick 4 is
yeah.
I don't know who that will be.
Maybe you could say like early in your career, like your first 10 years now, and then kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it might sound cliche, but I think when I was starting on. I mean, someone like obviously like Escoffier, obviously, like someone who really perfected French cooking and then really organized it because there's a lot of cooking in other countries where, like Mexico, let's just say, like, people's been cooking centuries, but it's like, it's not like as organized or as it like, written out and really passed down. So it's like, the family knew it and then they pass on, where like he really like, recorded the whole thing and they really created a system. So like can get passed on. Yeah. So it's like, if the 100 French chefs make hollandaise, it's going to look pretty similar. Right. And I think that's pretty amazing of that era. And of course, I think another ones will be like, someone like André Natera. I think his cookbook really changed what, beautiful food looked like. And I think traditionally what I thought this dish looked cool. And then, their cookbooks came out and then really like revolutionizing the way we cook and way we, look at food. And I think maybe now it's like people are getting away from the whole sciencey aspect of it, but I think it's like, cooking as an entertainment. And all those things still live on. And I think, they drastically changed the way we eat and the way we approach food. But I don't know who else.
What about today? Who are you looking at today?
Today, I don't know. It's really hard to say. As I do more and more of the ice cream thing, it's like
Is there someone in the ice cream world that's?
I don't know any famous ice cream chef, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. If you had a chef's PSA out there, like if you were going to give advice to a young cook or a new cook, say, yeah, this is a chef's PSA, do this or don't do this in the kitchen, what would it be?
Yeah, I think you do this is, as I said earlier, I think it's really like, it's about, I think it's the same as the cooking, all the topics we talked about. I think whether it's like, investment or whether it's the language things or art or anything, I think look at it in the long term. I mean, you stop looking at everything in like such a short term thing where it's like, like quick thing, whether it's like, I do this and I need to get this back, or I do this today and I need to make this much. And then, in 2 weeks from now, I think it's like looking things in much more longer time frame. True. And really start making, doing little things every day, even though you don't see the result. I mean, if you want a six pack, you're not going to get it tomorrow, right? The same kind of thing. I think if you really want to accomplish something big, I think you really have that long-term goal. I don't think it needs to be like 155C Italian fine dining restaurant with tasting menu in 5 cooks. I don't think you need to go that granular, but I think you should have at least like where you want to be in broader terms, and then what do you want to accomplish? I mean, I think that's exactly what I did with myself too. Is I was happy with doing what I was doing, managing a Michelin restaurant and all the fine dining restaurant. But I think for me to decide to open the ice cream shop and pursue my own venture, that's something that I really wanted to do and do it because I want to do it, not because I have to do it. But I mean, it does take long-term thinking and then really like doing what you can today so that tomorrow gets a little easier or better. Mm-hmm. And I think continuously doing those things, I think is something that you can do even with young chefs. And the flip side is obviously like, just looking at everything as a transaction. And, for me to do this, you have to give me this kind of,
Yeah. Well, Chef, it was great talking to you. Where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, I think people can find me, I mean, of course in DC, but outside of that, I mean, we're pretty active on the Instagram. So my personal Instagram is T Nishikawa, 1202. But Snow Crane Ice Cream is where we can find our progress and things like that.
Well, good luck with everything. I can't wait to try the ice cream. I'll see you soon in DC.
Thank you.
All right, Chef. Thank you.
Well, hope you enjoyed the show. You know what to do if you want to support. Go to chefspsa.com, get yourself something. Books, merch. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else, make sure you leave a 5-star review. It goes a long way. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week. Hit the porno music.
No André in the kitchen, mixing, dropping chef knowledge, no fiction. Stirring up the beats, heating up the session. Listen close, class is in session.